Hope everybody's doing well. I just came back from going outside for a minute, enjoying some of that fresh air and wonderful temperatures that are on the outside and all along those lines. So I saw that we had some amazing temperatures that were out there. Felt like it was probably around 80 degrees. It felt more like it was around June or July versus early March and everything like that. I've got two amazing guests, getting to bring them on, see what they've got going on in their lives and what's going on with them. I know that one of them has been involved in the military, and I'm definitely curious to see what they've got to say about a number of the things that are taking place in the world because leadership is very important, and that's something we talk about regularly here on the online dinner party, just like we talk about the leadership that coaches have to have and all in that space. So we've got a lot of things that are going on in that space. And like I said, I was glad to get out and just sit on my steps or the steps of the apartment that I live in and enjoy some of that nice weather outside. And I might do that again later on as well. But it's definitely some great weather, even though I understand the temperature is going to take a serious nosedive here in North Carolina in the not too distant future and everything like that. Because I think we're supposed to be getting down to the 30s tomorrow after some rain rolls in and all in that space. So always glad to have these amazing guests, and I'm going to bring in one of them with Jack Radcliffe. I'm also going to bring in Faith Luster in a little bit as well, but definitely want to hear from Jack and how he's doing. And I hope that where you are, it's wonderful weather because I've been enjoying this North Carolina weather and everything like that. And of course, right now we're in the middle of sports season, and a lot of people are getting excited. We've got the ACC tournament that is starting. I'm a Marquette graduate, so even though we had a down year this year, we did manage to upset Connecticut, and we'll see if we can win our first round game and possibly play them twice. And if we beat them twice, that would be a minor miracle with the down year that we've had and everything like that. But we'll see how this all plays out and all in that space. But I am a fan of Shaka Smart and the way that he handles leadership and everything like that. And I know that you are a person that has written an amazing book that talks about some of the things that you learned. Because you've got this literary memoir of character, discipline, and service. And a lot of people are paying attention to what's going on in terms of discipline and responsibility. And I'm loving the title, Riding the White Bull, The Making of a Navy SEAL. So I know that that's going to be released. Looks like it was released maybe even yesterday and everything like that. But you talk about some of the things that you learned, including some interesting experiences that shaped your resilience. And that's something we talk about here on this network as well. And I know that you've got that rigorous West Texas upbringing, and apparently you've even fought some forest fires. So I'm definitely interested in hearing about that. And you definitely were involved in the elite training with the Underwater Demolition Team 11, which is the direct precursor to the day's Navy SEALs. And apparently, you even had to fight some forest fires in Yellowstone Park, and even had maybe a leader that was having you under fire. So I don't know how that would be having to take on a deranged training instructor all along those lines. But a lot of this has brought you to be the leader that you are, and you talk about that in your book. So I'm even hearing that you've ridden a white Brahma bull, and even when I see the running of the bulls in Spain, I'm going like, and I know that my grandfather had cows and bulls and everything like that, and I'm not trying to take on a running bull, but you do not mind taking them on and all in that space. So share a little bit more about your story. I've given a lot of it already with what I've learned and everything, but it looks like you are definitely learned a lot, and we know a lot of people are learning about responsibility, even with some of the conflicts that we're going through in this modern day time.
Well, thank you for having me on. Yeah, I wrote this book. I didn't set out to write one of these chest thumping memoirs about how tough the Navy SEALs were, but I did want to share that experience, and I wanted to share some of the lessons I think I got out of it. Uh, I also uh, wanted to leave something for my great great grandchildren and tell them a little more about what their ancestors were like. You pick up the old family albums, and there are these musty pictures of these
Mm-hmm.
old guys and old women and men with beards, and you say, well, that was your great grandfather. Well, that means nothing. You don't know anything about them. So I'm hoping that this book will survive long enough that someday one of my grandchildren will pull it off the shelf, and he will say, Dad, what's this? And Dad will say, well, son, that's a book. That's the way people used to get information. And you could read that book and find out about your great great grandfather. And of course, the kid would say, "Well, Dad, we don't read books. We talk about holograms these days." So it's a faint hope. It's kind of like putting a note in a bottle and throwing it out to sea. But that's my overall hope for the book. And then I also just wanted to share with others the experience of a young man coming of age in the mid-century USA, part of which was an adventure in being on board a ship and command of a ship. And part of it was the SEAL training, which is very difficult, the hardest thing I ever did in my life. But I wanted some people to know what that's like and maybe draw some lessons from my experience.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense and everything. And I'm glad you got this book to give some people some insights and all along those lines. As you were saying that, one of the things that crossed my mind is that I've got a lot of friends that have passed on and things of that nature. And I've got some friends that were definitely involved in concerts and events and everything like that. And unfortunately, some of those things are lost because they did not always record what should have been recorded and everything like that. So I do know that that is a regret that many people have, even in my own family, because I know that I have a uncle that passed not that long ago, and I think one of his grands is hoping to write some of the stories that she remembers him telling, and all along those lines. But I just wanted your thoughts around that, because I do sometimes think that we've gotten so into this quick society so much that we don't really pay enough attention to the lessons learned from the past and from those that are in our family history.
I agree. I think that's right.
Yeah, we've got to do a better job on that and everything like that. What are some of the lessons that you're hoping that folks will learn from your book and everything like that? Because, like I said, I was hearing more
I
about
think,
it.
yeah, thank you. I believe one of the lessons I learned from various experiences, but mainly with my training with the SEALs, is uh, is how important in life and success tenacity is. Just hanging on. When we first showed up for SEAL training, there were 45 of us, and we had this little feisty drill instructor who pulled us all together. And he said, "All right," he said, "you may think you don't have the body for this." He said, "Don't worry about that. If you got the if you got the willpower, the Navy will give you the body."
Mhm.
And that's how it turned out. If you looked at that 45 people that started, uh, you would never have picked the nine that wound up finishing. Uh, it didn't have anything to do with their bodies. It had to do with what was between their ears, and it had to do with a desire to hang on in the face of a lot of harassment and a lot of pain. Uh, so I don't. I guess one lesson I would pass on is tenacity pays off. You can be smart, you can be strong, but it's the tenacious who usually succeed in spite of everything.
No, I can definitely agree with you that. I was the worst track runner of all times when I was in high school and everything like that. I was probably like dead last until I recruited a friend that I knew that I could beat and everything along those lines. But I do admire what my coach's attitude was and everything like that, because I think he recognized that people had the various skills. One of my skills was being a good networker, so I actually helped put together a team that won our championship, our conference championship, 3 out of my 4 years in terms of like recruiting some of the football players and other players from other sports to make sure that we had a strong team and all along those lines. But his attitude, and I think you'll get a kick out of this, Mr. Ratliff, and everything like this, was that he was going to run you and run you and run you and run you. And if you survived, you made the team. Because, like I said, I was not a good track runner. I probably finished dead last most of my running and everything like that. But his attitude was, because we lived in a rural town, was he was going to do those up and down the bleacher drills and the suicide drills, I think is what they call them, and a number of other kind of trainings, including cross country training. And if you survived, you were on the team. So I think that that was his kind of attitude, and I think that that might be the attitude of even some military people as well.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about reminds me of. I didn't go on the survival courses, but some of my friends did when I was in the demolition teams and in the SEALs. And the Navy had a survival course where they took you down off the coast of Mexico. They drop you off. They leave you with a book of matches, a fish hook, a couple of fish hooks, and a knife. They come back in a week. If you're still there, you passed.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what you were saying. It was a question of survival on your track team. And I guess we both agree that there's no underestimating how far somebody can go if they just refuse to quit.
Exactly. There's that having that will to win, that will to be determined. And I know one of the things I talk about on this show regularly, and I'm going to bring in the other guests as well and hear what she's got going on in the musical space and everything like that. But sometimes one of the things we talk about quite often on this show is that whole imposter syndrome, and how a lot of times we have that inner voice and everything that stops us from doing things that we probably can do, whether that's in relationships or whether that's in life or jobs and things along those lines. But it seems like you are a very determined person, and you probably never even ran across the imposter syndrome. Or did you have that inner critic voice that was sometimes getting on you as well, and you were sitting there going like, I cannot have this, and listening too much to your own voice and everything like that?
I hear you about that, and of course I have that inner voice too. I think most people I know do. So yeah, you have to shut that guy up so you can get done what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have to do that. Faith, glad you were able to join us as well. Share a
Thank
little bit
you.
about your
Thank you.
story from the musical standpoint. I know that your press secretary, just like his press secretary, had been in touch with me and everything like
Mhm.
that. So tell me a little bit about what you've got going on the musical line standpoint, and how you dealt with that inner voice. Because I know that there probably even been things in your life where you were going like, I can't be a singer at this age.
Yes. So I am a singer songwriter here in the Bay Area in California. And yeah, doubt does creep in a lot when it comes to going on stage and you haven't been on stage for a long time and singing or trying out a new song to see if someone enjoys it or not. So, but you just have to keep pressing, and some will like it, some won't. But as long as I reach one person, I'm golden. So, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense for both you, Mr. Ratliff, as well as you, Faith, and everything. But I know one of the things that your book talks about, Riding the White Bull, is what it takes to be a leader. So, what do you think are some of the qualities of leadership? Because we hear people talking about some of our leaders that are here in the society, whether they're corporate leaders or whether they're political leaders, and questioning what their leadership skills are. So, I was just wondering, in your mind, what does it take to be a leader, and what are some of the qualities that we should be looking for in the leaders in our life?
Well, in my experience, and of course I don't have all the answers to that, but in my experience, good leadership is not bombast. It's not ordering people around. It's not being inflexible. It's quiet confidence. And I believe that quiet confidence comes from preparation. I don't think you're born with it. But if you're well prepared, you know what's going on, you know what the obstacles are going to be, and you quietly go about transmitting your thoughts to the people that are going to have to do the work or follow you. I really think that's it. I think people mistake sometimes leadership with whoever in the room can yell the loudest or who's the biggest, and that's not real leadership. The leaders that I served under,
Mhm.
that I most respected and got the most out of the men, was very quiet. In fact, my father originated that. He was an ex-coach when I was playing sports. He had already retired from that, but he expected us to really perform well. He expected us to be sportsmanlike. He expected us to keep our head in the ball game, as they say. And if we didn't, he wasn't any yelling, and he didn't care. Honest to goodness, he didn't care whether we won or lost. But if we bitched about a bad call to an official or we weren't sportsmanlike, we heard about it in spades. And so the way he led was he would praise you if you did well. If you messed up, it'd just be a little sad shake of the head. Well, I would do anything to avoid that sort of sad thing about, well, it looked like you were pooping off out there. So I tried to follow that when I was leading men on the ship and in the teams. But I think false leadership is a lot of noise, a lot of bragging, and an inflexibility. I think real leaders are not threatened when somebody wants to make a suggestion or think something. You have to assert your authority ultimately. But the way I ran my crew and demolition teams is I would say, okay, we're going to land over there on Red Beach. And somebody would say, well, Blue Beach looks like there's fewer there. So we would actually have a short discussion. You don't have a lot of time. And we'd have a short discussion. And then I would decide. And from then on, I expected everybody to shut up and do their job. But everybody felt they'd been heard. And believe me, hearing from your subordinates can save you from a lot of bad mistakes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Faith, what do you say about that? Because I do have friends that are musicians, some of them that are band leaders, some of them are band leaders that are singers. And I do know that sometimes it
Yeah.
is hard to take that leadership role, even as a band leader, if you're a songwriter and everything like that. So I
Yeah.
was wondering your take on that the notion of leadership, because sometimes people do not want to hear the person is the leader because they might have the stereotypes if it's a woman leader and
I
along
know.
those lines. So I was just wondering your take on what it is taking for you to be a leader, because I think that a lot of times band leaders are also leaders as well.
Exactly. Yes, and I agree with Mr. Ratliff that getting feedback from your team members and how you can do better. Every show that we have, we talk about what can we do better when it comes to marketing, or that turnaround was horrible, so let's not do that next time. And so having input from everyone makes us better. So every show that we do moving forward, we're able to do it well. So I agree. I
That makes a
agree.
lot of sense. And this is for both of you. I know that discipline is very much important in the military. It's also important in show business and everything like that, but it's not something that everybody naturally has. I mean, we all hope that we are disciplined, but sometimes we can be
Mhm.
undisciplined as well. So, what is your thoughts around that? And I'll start with you, Mr. Ratliff, but I definitely want to hear from Faith as well, because a lot of people automatically think that they just have natural discipline traits, but I do know that it is a learned trait, and not everybody is willing to take the time to learn the traits of discipline.
Mhm.
Well, I have to confess, I was a slow study. I got in the ROTC in college mainly because they were drafting people out of college and not letting them finish. So I knew that would get me a chance to get a degree. So I got in the ROTC, and there's a lot of drilling and there's a lot of military discipline. I resented it. I was obnoxious. I didn't want to do all that. I thought it was pretty dumb. And so I was probably one of the worst drillers you've ever seen, go out and march around. I couldn't figure out why we were doing it. I mean, armies, I was in the Navy ROTC. Armies need to march, Marines need to march, but there's no place on a ship to march. And I thought, this is totally ridiculous. Well, so I kept rebelling and was undisciplined. And I kept getting called up before the captain and getting penalized in petty ways. And I finally figured it out. This Navy is it's like a big threshing machine. And it's going to keep coming forward. And as long as you stand in front of it, it's going to keep chewing you up and spitting you out. And I thought, maybe it might be a better idea just to do what they tell me. And from then on, the Navy and I got along a lot better. We became partners instead of adversaries. So that may not directly answer your question, but I think that part of discipline has to be learned, and sometimes it has to be learned, as I did, through foolish conduct and petty rebellion.
That makes sense. Faith, how much has discipline been a important part of your singing career? Because it sounds like you have getting back into the singing game at a
Yeah.
later part in the life and everything like that. So, how much has
Yeah.
discipline played a role in your singing career?
It's very important. And I'm a person that I have the characteristics of ADHD. So I have people surrounding me to support me, to help me stay on track. And but when it comes to like rehearsing, once a week, going over the music, and writing for me happens, all throughout the day, any time of the day. But when it comes into rehearsing and honing in on those skills, I have that wonderful team of members that help support me to stay on track. So they help me with the discipline for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. And Mr.
Yeah.
Ratliff, on that same category, how important, because you served in the military, but I know you've also been in the corporate world and everything like that. How important do you think it is to have that correct team and that right team with you? Because I think a lot of times people think that they have the right team and maybe they aren't even assembling the right team. So how important do you think it is to find the people that will be having your back in whatever you're doing, whether it's the
Yeah.
military or business?
Well, that's a good point. And you can't, if you're leading a team, whatever it is, a committee or an army or whatever, you're not any better than your worst soldier. And you really have to be careful about the people you put in those positions. But the way I used to try to do that is there's a fine line. I'm talking now about the law practice. Get a young lawyer, and you don't ever learn anything if you don't stretch yourself a little bit, go a little past your capacity. So I would put them into situations where they were something they weren't experienced in, they're a little nervous about. And one day, one of them came to me and said, "Well, I'm really a little nervous. I'm going to screw this up." And I said, just trust me. I'm not going to give you any chore that's going to sink the ship. So you go do what you're going to do, and I'll be here. I got your back, and go ahead. But I think part of leadership is knowing when to give your subordinates their head and let them do what they're doing, and when you have to rein them back. And it's kind of a fine line sometimes.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. That fine line definitely exists and everything like that. But I know another part of leadership is responsibility and having that good responsibility in whatever you're doing. So for both of you, how important is it for you to be a responsible leader as well? Because I definitely think that sometimes people are irresponsible in their leadership. So I'll start with you, Faith, but I definitely want to hear from Jack as well. So what is your
Yeah.
thoughts around the responsibility even of being a band leader?
So I just wrote a song actually entitled Accountability. And I
Hmm.
think being responsible, you have to take accountability for your mess ups, as well as those things that happen inadvertently. And then things that you do well, just being able to take accountability for your actions, or, if we messed up or we didn't sell enough tickets or whatever, taking ownership of those events. I think that helps you grow and build your character as a person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's your take on that, Jack?
Well, I have to agree 100% with Faith Lester. You know, how can you how can you change and keep from making the same mistakes over and over again if you don't ever acknowledge you made the mistake? I mean, you
Mm.
really do have to own it, as you put it very well. You got to own your mistakes. And my idea is that that is what leads to improvement in subordinates or anybody you're working with. Uh, you got to acknowledge first that you were wrong, and then you figure out what to do. And that's another thing. The really good leaders that I've seen are not afraid. They're confident enough. They're not afraid to admit they're wrong from time to time. And I think I agree with Faith. I think that is really critical in making in anybody's improvement, whether they're working for you or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Everything. I know that one of the things that you're hoping to do with your book, Jack, and everything like that, is this notion of having a message for our young people. I know a lot of people are disappointed by our young people. I don't have any kids of my own. I don't know if Faith does or not, but I do know that some people are disappointed because of them being attached to the devices. I do have two nephews, and I know they love their devices, even though I think that they are good leaders. Matter of fact, the oldest one is getting ready to go off to college in the fall and everything like that. So I think last I heard he might be heading to UNCG, even though he's looking at a couple of other colleges here in North Carolina where I'm based at and he's based at as well. But I just wanted y'all's take on leadership and how our youth are doing it as well. Because I do hear some people complaining that the Gen Z people are not as strong leaders as some of their previous generations. But I don't know if y'all agree with that or not. And I do know that sometimes they can get caught up in outside factors, whether that's gangs or whether that's video games or a number of other things. So I just wanted y'all's take on how our young people are doing, because I know even on this show I've talked about creativity and how it seems like their sense of play isn't as much out there as it was when I was a kid and everything like that. But I don't know if y'all agree or don't agree. But I just wanted y'all's take on how our young people are doing.
What do you think, Faith?
I have four children, and they're between 15 and 24. And if I could brag a little bit, I am very proud of them. They are leaders in their own right. Some are very interested in, business, and so they're leaders in the business world. Others are, leaders when it comes to culinary. So I'm very proud, thank God, proud of my kids for taking the leaderships. They are still on their phones a lot. So, but no, they're great kids, and I see the future is bright, because I think the kids now, they see the screw ups of our current, leadership, and they're like, nope, we got to make changes. And so I think they're focused and ready to go.
What's your take on that, Jack? Because you do have grandkids, it sounds like. And like I said, I don't
Yeah,
have any.
I gotta be, I gotta be honest. I'm 91 years old, so my idea of young people is you two guys. So you're the young people I'm talking to. But what I see in the next generation from you is I see there's a lot of hope there. Yeah, I think that the video games and all that stuff are distracting. But I take kind of the long view of that. When I was growing up, we didn't have video games, but we did have comic books.
Mhm.
And I read every comic, everything I get my hand on. My mother was distressed. She thought I ought to be reading good books. People were saying, "What's this generation coming to? All they do is read those comic books and play their silly games." So I think we can overdo this business about concern about the youth. Uh, but I got to confess that my day-to-day involvement with teenagers is very limited. I've got two grandchildren, and I live in Santa Fe, and they don't live here, so I don't see them all that often. But I think I feel real good about them. I think they're responsible. I think they're very creative, and so I have a lot of hope. I know that there's a lot of despair these days about the younger generation, but I don't really feel that.
I'm glad to hear that, and I've been hearing that from a lot of my guests on this show. So it does seem like there is some hope for the kids, and that they are even taking some, as you were saying, Faith, taking some uh, drive and efforts in even some of the causes that they're interested in, and all along those lines, whether it's climate, whether it's politics, or whether it's a number of other things. So they do seem like they are engaged in everything. I do have to ask you, Jack, because I also was involved to some degree in comic books and everything. Was there a favorite comic book that you had when you were growing up? Because I mean, I am in my early 60s and everything like that. So I do remember the Spider-Mans and the Superman comic books when they were
Yeah,
actually in book form, and even Mad magazine and
right.
everything like that. But were there any particular comic books that were of interest to you when you were growing up?
Well, I love Mad Magazine, but my favorite comic character was Plastic Man. I don't know if you ever read into Plastic Man, but he could conform himself to any shape, but he had a red costume with a little gold diamond on it. So when the bad guys would come in the room, you'd see a lamp over there. There's a red lamp with a little gold diamond on it, and you knew these guys were in trouble because that lamp's going to turn into Plastic Man. You're going to get them. His sidekick was called Woozy Winks. And so my son and I were talking about if we ever got kidnapped, what would be the secret word to tell so you know they were talking to me or talking to him. So our code word is Woozy Winks if he ever gets kidnapped, or I do, because how many people in the world are going to know that name? Not
That's
many.
true. Not many people know that name at all. Faith, did you have any comic books or things that you were interested in as a young person? I do know that I had a friend of mine that I lost touch with, but they were very much involved in the Barbie culture. But I was wondering if there was any comic books that you were raised on as well.
No, not comic books, but I love Wonder Woman. I'm a huge fan of Wonder Woman, so yeah. But no, no comic books.
And Wonder Woman had their comic books as well, so there's no problem with that and everything. Jack, I have to ask you this because it's been something that's been on my mind ever since I first heard about you through your agent and everything like that. But what was it like being involved in the rodeo circuit and everything like that? Because you not only were a veteran, but you also took on of this bulls and everything like that. And I can only imagine what it would be like to be in the rodeo culture, because I know that that's very much like NASCAR. Because I'm here in North Carolina and we've got that whole NASCAR culture and everything like that. I know rodeo's got a whole macho culture as well. So what was it like being involved in the rodeo circuit, and how long were you in the rodeo circuit?
Well, that's, I wish I could say I was in the circuit. My rodeo experience was limited to three rides. I rode what was supposed to be a bull at a honky tonk in Kerrville, Texas on the dare. And it was kind of an overgrown calf, so that one didn't much count. I was in college at the University of Texas, and a friend of mine came up to me and said, "There's going to be a rodeo in town. We ought to enter." Well, I came out of West Texas, country town, but I was kind of a town boy. I rode horses a lot, but I wasn't any expert. And but I did have a pair of handmade cowboy boots. So he gave me a hard time. He said, "You got those handmade boots, but I want to see whether you can really ride. So let's take this bet and go enter this rodeo." So I was kind of shamed into it. And I said, "Okay." And then I found out that he was an expert horseman, that he'd been the head wrangler at a Boy Scout camp. But I'd made the bet. But at least that was a dumb thing to do, by the way. I wouldn't recommend that. But we agreed we were going to ride the bulls and ride a bareback. So I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. So I went out and looked up this old rodeo cowboy outside of Austin, Texas. He lived out in the pines. And I spent a lot of time with him. And he just gave me a whole lot of clues about what to do, what not to do, kind of a paint by the numbers kit for
Mhm.
rodeo. And he said, he told me, he said, now you've only got to stay on that bull for 8 seconds. He said, sounds like a short time, don't it? He said, son, that's going to be the longest 8 seconds in your life. And he was right. But I stayed on till the bell, and I went to bed. But I couldn't have done it. And that's, somebody asked me what lessons you get out of that. One of the lessons I get out of that, there's no substitute for preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still prepare when it's too late. You find yourself already over your head, but you can still do some preparation to bail yourself out. And I see Faith nodding. I bet she's done the
Yes.
same thing.
Yes. No, I just rode a horse for the first time. I was in Jamaica, and I knew that I was going to be on a horse for like at least 2 miles. So I did stretches, and I made sure I could, get on and get off. So I did prepare for that. And so I was able to get on, and I held my own. So I was so proud of myself. But then afterwards, I got a massage. So I wasn't sore. Most people complained about being sore riding a horse, but I survived. I
Yeah.
survived.
You
Yeah.
survived that horse and everything. Hey, Faith, is there any other things that you thought about doing? Because he mentioned that he had done this on a dare and everything. I can tell you, because I've actually mentioned this on a couple of these shows and everything. I had a ex-girlfriend that wanted me to go skydiving, and as far as I'm concerned, planes are for the purpose of taking you from point A to point B. They're not for falling out of. But that's just me. I mean, I get that some people like doing that, but that would not be something that I would consider. Now, I have considered whitewater rafting and some other interesting things that might be equally dangerous, but I don't think that I want to fall out of a plane. So, Faith, is there anything that you have considered doing that would be risky that you had to think about? You mentioned the horses, but is there anything else?
Yeah, so my name pretty much means take a risk, right? And so I'm always a risk taker. Zip lining would be something amazing. Hot air balloons, I enjoy just being free up in the air, free. So, yeah, so those two are like on my next bucket list.
Well, I'm thinking that 91, you've already accomplished your bucket list, Jack, and everything like that. But some people have things that they want to do before they hit 100, or maybe that's your bucket list is to make it to the Century Club and everything like that, and have the weatherman celebrate you as they oftentimes will do. But is there anything that is on your bucket list that you haven't done yet? Because you've already had that encounter with the White Brahma Bull, and you've already had a couple of other encounters, including apparently a college hazing ritual. And I know some people are even concerned about hazing in this modern day time and everything like that. So I definitely want to hear about this hazing ritual. But there's things that you have thought about doing that you haven't done as of yet.
I really don't. Most of the things I wanted to do in life, I've done. Not that there are other things to be accomplished. Somebody did ask me though one time. Said, "At your age now, looking back, what would you tell your younger self about riding that bull?"
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is, I'll tell my younger self, don't ride that bull. That was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. And the same week that I rode, some rodeo cowboy got kicked in the head in Oklahoma and got a brain bleed and died. I mean, it was dangerous. And Tommy Barstow, this old rodeo hand I talked to, stopped. He was telling me, giving me all these tips. He stopped and he said, now, I don't know how to say this, but he said, you don't know what you're doing. And he said, a little embarrassment from backing out ain't near as bad as being a lifetime cripple. So you want to think about that. But I was young and dumb and I'd already committed myself. So I said, no, I've got to do this. And so it came out all right. But it's not something I would recommend to a young person unless they're raised. Some of these guys are raised on a ranch. They've been cowboying since they were 12. Well, that wasn't me.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything like that. Now I know that even I'm not that far from a couple of universities. Duke is just around the corner, and they're the number one team in basketball right now. But North Carolina Central University, which is an HBCU, isn't that far, and we've got Durham Tech. And I know that every once in a while I'll hear about these hazing rituals. I did not join a fraternity, even though I had my roommate when I was in college at Marquette that was in one of the frats and tried to recruit me. I did one of his mutual friend of ours tried to recruit me to one of the other ones. So I think it was both the Kappas and the Alphas and everything like that, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe it was the Qs and the Alphas. But definitely, I was not going to do it because some of those hazing rituals are very painful. I know one involved hot sauce and parts of the body that don't need hot sauce on them, and I'll just leave it at that and everything like that. So I was just wondering, what was it about this hazing ritual that you decided to take part in this when you were a much younger man, Jack? And I don't know if Faith has pledged a sorority or anything like that, but what was it that got you into this hazing ritual?
Well, when I was a pledge, I didn't have any choice, and I didn't know any better, and I did it. Looking back, I don't think I would do that again. But there can be a construct. And then when I got to be the pledge trainer, that's the one that tells the pledges what to do. I cut out most of those things. There were a couple of them I couldn't cut out because the alums wouldn't let me. But I tell you, the benefit to me was whoever designed the Hell Week and underwater demolition team SEALs, they must have been in college fraternity because a lot of it was really familiar. It was pretty much, and that whole training is mostly the first part of it's nearly all harassment, people yelling at you, making you do push-ups, whatever. So even though hazing, I think it's dumb and dangerous, I was able to benefit from it when I was going through the same kind of thing. I will say that in my behalf, after I was teaching in law school, the president of the university made me put me in charge of a commission to try to figure out how to do away with hazing. And we came up with a lot of recommendations, some of which were followed, some of which weren't. But it's a hardy weed that's hard to stamp out, and I'll be willing to bet I haven't kept up, but I'll be willing to bet they're doing it about like they did back then today. So it's hard to stop.
Yeah, it's hard, definitely hard to stop.
But it's very dangerous. That commission, we found out in the past 8 years, one kid had died because he was strapped to some bed springs and they put electrical shock to it. Two others died because of drinking contests. Kids don't understand about alcohol. You know, your body will throw it off if you drink just moderately excessively. But if you drink fast enough, it puts your reflexes to sleep and you can't throw up the toxin and it'll kill you. And these
Wow.
kids don't know that. One of the things my commission did was to be sure that the university told these people going into hazing that we give them an indoctrination saying what happens if you drink too much too fast. That's where most hazing deaths occur in these fraternities. And it's a shame. It's such foolishness.
Yeah, definitely. Faith, are any of your kids involved in the fraternity or sorority background? And were you involved in that? I don't know if you went to college or not and everything like that. Was that?
No, yeah, no, my children are not participating in that. And I went to Howard University
Mhm.
in Washington, D.C. So there were a lot of fraternities and sororities there. And I'm sure there was plenty of hazing, but I was me by me during my time. So I did not experience that.
Now, when you were at Howard, was a certain person who was running for president there as well, and everything like that, even though they did not win? But I do know that they are a Howard graduate as well, that being Kamala Harris. So I don't know if that was
Mhm.
before your time or after your time, or if you had a chance to.
After, yeah, she was after, yeah. I was after her time.
You were after her time and everything like that. So
Yes.
you might have had a chance to connect with her and all along those lines. Hey, Jack, one of the things that this network does is their founders, so one of the founders is an engineer, that being Kim Calhoun, but the other is a lawyer, and he is in the pension field and everything like that. So, as the one that has been both a law professor and a lawyer, what advice would you give to lawyers? Now, I will tell you that Nick Palvedo, who is the other founder of the network and everything, has now moved to Spain. So he's an expat, him and his wife, and originally it was him and his wife and his dog. Unfortunately, the dog did not like the move and did not survive in Spain. So it's just him and his wife that are
Mm.
there in Spain and everything like that. But what advice would you give to people that are thinking they want to be lawyers and or law professors? Because I do have some friends that are law professors even here in this area.
Well, uh, I would advise them to be very careful about choosing who they go to work for. It's sad, but it's true that young lawyers come out of law school. They've been taught in an ethics course what's right and what they're not supposed to do, but it's usually taught by a professor who's never even had been in a courtroom, so they don't pay any attention to them. So they get out. The ones who understudy a very ethical lawyer, I was very fortunate I did. You can count on it. Their ethics are high, and you can count on them, and you can take their word to the bank. They go to work for a sleazebag, they're pretty likely to turn into a sleazebag. And the reason is they don't know what the real world is. And the bad lawyer is telling them, well, they teach you all that Sunday school stuff in law school, but that's not how it really works. How it really works is we got to hide this evidence or we got to tell the judge something that's not true. I used to give a lecture in law school that I call my profiles in courage, and it was lawyers I'd known who stood up and did the right thing, the ethical thing, the truthful thing, even when it cost them, even when it cost their case, even when it put them in a bad light. And I have to say, lawyers get a bad rap, but my experience is that I'd say at least 80% of the lawyers I dealt with were very trustworthy. But the problem is, as I used to tell my students, I said, you ever pick up the paper and read a headline that says, ethical lawyer does his duty? And I said, you won't ever see that. The only headline you see is sleazebag lawyer steals from his client. And so I said, the problem with the public perception is you got maybe 10, 15% that are getting all the ink, and that's the image that people see. So yeah, I would, back to your question, I would say be very careful about who you pick for your leader.
And Jackie, probably doesn't help that there is a lot of sleazeback lawyers that are portrayed in a positive way or in a semi-positive way on some of our media outlets as well. So the media
Sure enough.
coverage of lawyers probably doesn't help as well. Because I mean, I am a fan of some of those legal shows and some of those police shows, but I also know that they're not overly realistic. I mean, I'm a fan of Bull and a fan of a couple of other things because I know Bull is the one where he's picking the jury and trying to like have this whole algorithm around the jury and everything like that. But how much of that is actually going on in regular law rooms, that I'm not sure of. I think a lot of that it might just be trick Hollywood and everything like that. So how much of that is reality? Those kind of like algorithms of the picking of the juries.
Well, it's the same thing as I was saying about the newspapers. Nobody wants to watch a TV series where it's just a straight arrow lawyer doing his job. I mean, you got to get some stuff. So I cut him a little slack on that. I'm a fan of Michael Connolly, and his lawyer is one of those that you're talking about. He cuts some corners, but I hope people can see that that's fiction and that real life is somewhat different.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Faith, you mentioned you were going to Howard, and I was wondering, what did you major at when you were in Howard, and what did that uh, field or background bring into your current career as a singer and everything like that? So, what were you studying
Yeah.
when you were in school, and how have you brought that to
Mhm.
your current profession?
Yeah. So I started off in jazz voice, and then I switched over to communication sciences and disorders, and where I'm currently a speech pathologist now. I practice speech pathology in Maryland and in California. So knowing the anatomy and physiology of the structures, my voice, my diaphragm, my lungs, being able to understand that and understand when I'm tired and what I need to do to recover. So that's definitely been helpful in learning all that while at Howard University. So
Learn that and everything. But you're actually one of those people that's fortunate enough to be, it sounds like, bi-coastal in your work. So it sounds like you are
yes.
licensed in both Maryland and in California. So how much speech pathology work do you have? And I know some people will be like, is that a job that I can make a living at? Because I've even had on
Oh,
this network some people that are saying like, I am by training a journalist and everything like that. And I know some people be like, journalists don't really make that much money, which is true. Just
okay.
like teachers don't really make that much money. So I don't know what the
Yeah.
income like is for pathologists. And I've even had on this network people complain
Mhm.
about archaeologists saying like, why would you want to go dig up bones knowing you're not going to make any money?
I know. Well, the field of speech pathology, there's a shortage of speech pathologists, and that's been the trend for a long time. So there's, if you know anyone who loves to help people and they're not afraid to, um, do oral exams or anything like that, tell them to major in speech pathology for sure. Um, yeah, speech pathology is a very rewarding career, not only, um, professionally for ourselves, but financially as well. If you play your cards right, and you negotiate your contracts, you can definitely do well. I think it showed up as the top 10 profession in the world. So it's definitely a wonderful field to be in. Just wish more people would go into it because that
Yeah,
we need more people to help.
you're the second person that I've interviewed that has mentioned that about their fields. Because I had the pleasure of interviewing a couple of weeks ago a person that was in the interpretation field, meaning like the death interpretation, and there
Oh,
is a
sign language.
serious shortage of people that can do
Yeah.
that interpretation. Even though we see a lot of people on some of these award shows that are doing that and everything like that, but that particular gentleman was telling me that there is a serious shortage of deaf
Yes.
interpreters and everything like that, which I
Yes.
did not realize.
Yes. Yep, there are. Yes, I can agree with that. I was able to take some classes at Gallaudet University while I was in DC, and I learned how to interpret for some friends. Nothing professionally, but just on the side, and there's a shortage there too because the law is set in place for them to be able to have those interpreters to help them communicate their needs and their wants. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Jack, what has there been a shortage of because you did serve in the military in terms of military needs? Because I know that there's new things that are out there. I'm imagining there's probably people that need to learn how to fly those drones because apparently the Ukraine war is showing that that is a whole nother career and everything like that. But what are some of the things that you've heard from your military friends that are missing in terms of skill sets, even in our current military?
Well, I'm pretty much out of date on that. I was lucky recently. I went out to the West Coast, and because of a friend, I got a VIP tour of the new SEAL team headquarters out there, their training facilities. And they have got all kinds of wonderful things we didn't have. They've got one man submersible submarines, they've got remotely guided instruments to go spy on people. And uh, I think that I'm too out of date to tell you what they need, but I can tell you that they're improving all the time. And while the training I was in hasn't changed, they do exactly the same thing they did with us. But when they get out, they get some really sophisticated stuff that's just mind-boggling. So, and I'm sure that the most mind-boggling is something they don't ever let me see because I'm retired.
Yep, it's that whole need to know, and you probably don't need to know since you're not in the military, like you're saying, and everything. I know that I'm a fan of history and everything like that. My grandmother actually started the first African American library in Raleigh, North Carolina, and everything like that when she was living, and she passed way back in the 80s, but she had started that back in the 40s and all along those lines. And she definitely was a leader in a lot of ways, having gone to Columbia University and everything like that. So I'm definitely a fan of history. I'm actually considered at the Cultural Arts Center that I work at one of our staff historians and all in that space because we talk a lot about Black Wall Streets and things along those lines. But I'm just wondering, what are some history lessons that you wish more people knew about? Because I know that, Jack, you're also a fan of history as well, but I am oftentimes surprised at some of the history things that we don't know, including like maybe the history of Annie Oakley and some of the other folks that are out there as well. But are there any history lessons that you wish more people knew about?
Are you talking, asking me
Yeah,
or Faith? Is that
I'm
what
asking you.
Um, well, I think one piece of history that I wish people knew more about is in World War II, the underwater demolition team started with the Normandy invasion, and their mission was to go clean out these beach obstacles. Those are big concrete structures, big steel structures, and they would tear up the landing craft. So those had to be gotten out of the way before the Marines could even land. So the first people to set foot on that beach was not Marines, it was the UDT. They called them the Naked Warriors. They were out there in swimsuits and they were rigging explosives on all these things to blow them up. Then fast forward to the war in Japan, the island hopping campaign. It was the UDT was at the forefront. They're not getting any publicity. The publicity went to the Marines, which they fully deserved. But I've got a picture somewhere of a big sign, professionally look made sign that says, and it's a bunch of guys in bathing suits standing in front of it. It says, "Welcome Marines to Japan," signed
Mm.
underwater demolition teams. So they were the first people, and Ernie Pyle, the old war correspondent, wanted to write about them. He kept begging to write about them, but the brass wanted to keep it a secret. I don't know why they thought they could keep it a secret after the first time they did it, but they wouldn't let him write about it. He was so frustrated because he thought they needed to get extra additional credit. But the Marines and the UDT got along great because at one point, the brass in Washington wanted to give hazardous duty pay to the UDT. That was before that they were later the SEALs, and and the SEALs refused to take it unless they gave it to the Marines also. Well, the Marines found out about that, and from then on, they thought the demolition team guys were plenty okay. So I wish more people knew about that World War II because they lost about 60% of those people, and it was extremely hazardous. But we could have never taken those Japanese islands if it hadn't been for these guys thrashing around out there in swimsuits.
Wow, that's amazing and everything. What about you, Faith? Is there anything that you've learned either when you were at Howard or just in your own research of life that you wish more people knew about and everything like that?
Well, I I wish more people knew about Jesus,
Mhm.
and just to know, have that personal relationship with him. And I think that would make everyone's life so much better, especially people dealing with depression, mental illness, and having that foundation, that root. So I was thinking back, like, okay, who would I pick? And I was like, Jesus. Like, can everybody know who Jesus is, and not just what mainstream media says who Jesus is, but know him personally. So that's who I would choose.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything like that. I'm glad you brought that up. How important for both of you is the faith and that faith walk and everything like that? Because I'm imagining Jack is probably very important in your life in the military, and it sounds like it's very important to faith. So how important is that faith walk to you?
Well, of course, it's important. Mine's a little bit unorthodox. I don't follow a conventional religion, but I hope I follow the teachings of Jesus. Everybody should. And I've been, in recent years, I've been really involved in Buddhism. But, Thomas Merton was a writer who became a priest or became a monk. And he said he investigated worldwide religions and he came to the conclusion that at the lower levels, there's a lot of difference. Do you baptize, do you sprinkle, all that? He said when you get to the top, they all sound pretty much alike. The good religions come to the same conclusion. Many spokes to the center of the same wheel, and that's how I feel it works.
No, I agree with you on that and everything. It was interesting you say that because I remember a long time ago, my dad, who's still living and is an avid artist and a well-known artist here in this area, brought me and my younger brother. I don't even think my nephews had been born yet. Now that I think about it and everything, but I think Ted Koppel or something was doing a piece on the world religions, particularly the world's Western religions, and he came to that conclusion that you're of, which is that they have the same core principles of respect your family, respect Mother Nature, respect your neighbors, and a lot of the core principles. Now, they all have extremists on every religion, whether it's Buddhism or Muslims or Christian or whatever. So there are extremists on all of their religions, but the core principles are the same. So I'd agree with you that the core principles are the same of all the world religions and
I
everything like
agree.
that.
I don't think it's that complicated. I think it's pretty easy to understand. It's pretty hard to do. Is why so many people fall out.
Yeah, I agree with you on that and everything. Just really quickly, and then we'll get ready to wrap up in another 15, 20 minutes and everything along those lines. But um, are there some people in your life that you wish more people knew about? I kind of mentioned my grandmother, and I definitely there was others, even grandfather who the biology building is named after. So I'll start with you, Faith. Are there people in your own family tree that you wish more people knew about or that you just recently learned about? Like I said, I've known about grandma even when she was living
Yeah,
and everything like that.
yeah. Yeah, it would be my father. He passed away almost 30 years ago, close to 30 years. And I learned some things about my father after he had passed, and through my older cousins, and they're like, "Oh, Robert Calvin did this and he used to do that." And I was like, "Oh, my dad was so cool. He was already cool in my eyes. I was a daddy's girl." But my father, he was a minister of the gospel, and he was also a parole officer. And then I've learned that he did the taxes, for people in the neighborhood. And then he would also, be an advocate for people that were in trouble. So my dad was just such an amazing man. I wish more people, I wish my kids could have met him. So amazing, amazing man.
It sounds like it. Jack, what
Yeah.
about you? Is there anybody in your family that you wish more people knew about? Maybe it was an ancient ancestor that had done something in the Wild Wild West or something like that.
Well, I think maybe my grandfather. He was a preacher. He's a Southern Baptist preacher, and he was in Greenville, Texas, and that is not the most progressive part of the world, especially back in the 1920s and 30s. And I always thought that because he's a Southern Baptist, I knew about his attitudes, and I didn't think I would agree with him. Well, what I found out, he never told me. My uncle told me this. They had a parsonage at this place where visiting preachers would stay in the bedroom. And there was a black church in the area. Of course, that was segregation times. They didn't go to the same church. Black church in the area. And those ministers would come to town, and wasn't any place for them to stay particularly, so he would put them up in the parsonage. Well, the redneck white congregation didn't go for that, and they were really outraged. And the ladies of the church refused to come over and make up the beds and do all that stuff that they'd done. My grandfather didn't care; he kept on doing it. And there was an active Klan in the area, and when that was going on, the Methodist preacher was doing the same thing. They were both young guys, and they came in one day in all the white robes trying to intimidate people, and went in the Methodist church and tried to intimidate them. They didn't go to my grandfather's church. But here's my dirty little secret. His father was the head of the Klan in that area, and he and his father never got along. And when he'd go back to visit, he always visited his father-in-law. And I blamed my grandfather. I thought he just had married up into a better family, and he was ashamed of his father, who was a blacksmith. I'm now very well convinced that they could not agree on their approach to race, and that's why. And my grandfather took a lot of heat. As a matter of fact, the year after he did that, they kicked him out of that church, and he went on to another place to have another congregation. But it's easy these days to think that that was something to do. Those days, that took a lot of courage, and so
Yeah.
I'm proud of him for that. And I wish
No.
more people knew about it.
Yeah, and that's even what goes on. I mentioned being a historian here in Durham at the Hayti Heritage Center, which is a cultural arts center, African American cultural arts center, and everything like that. But that's one of the things we talk about is that part of Black Wall Street was actually in downtown, which means that the Black elite and the white elite actually spent more time together. So even one of the great leaders of the time, I think it was Booker T. Washington, talked about the fact that he had never seen a community, and particularly in the South, where there was that much connection between the races and everything like that. And my theory is that it's partially because they had proximity. So proximity can actually sometimes make you more have more appeal to each other and everything like that. And even the Duke founder, his barber, was one of the founders of the Black Wall Street, that being John Merrick and everything like that. And he had 3 barbershops. I think one was for his white customers, one for the Black customers, and one for other customers that might have been mixed or whatever else. But I know he had 3 barbershops. I forget what the 3rd barbershop was for and everything like that. But yeah, it's definitely a interesting kind of area, and that's part of the reason that I think that this part of North Carolina is probably more progressive than other parts of North Carolina, and historically even, and everything like that, because they were forced to be a lot closer to each other.
Well, you hit on something that I've noticed, and that is it's hard to hate a group when you know them as individuals.
Right.
And I grew up in a town. There was only one black family in my town. It was in West Texas. And Elmo was a good family man. He was a hard worker. He paid his bills, took care of his family, took care of his obligations. Everybody loved Elmo. There was only one Jew in town. She ran the dress shop. Everybody loved Miss Levinsky. They wasn't like anti-Jewish. But the Mexican population, there was terrible bigotry in that town. Nasty names, and there was great prejudice, and they had to stay on their side of the draw. And my observation is that you can't create prejudice as long as there is an individual knowledge of the person. And I've seen that over and over again. I wish it weren't that way. I wish people wouldn't hate in groups, but unfortunately, we still got some of that.
Yeah, we still got some of that, and that's actually one of the things. Even though I didn't serve in the military, I do have cousins that have served in the military and cousins that have served in law enforcement, and I think that that is probably one of the advantages of the military, is that you can't really hate somebody in the foxhole, no matter what their orientation is or their race or a number of other things, because y'all are all in a common fight, whatever that fight is, and everything like that. So I think that it's probably one of the most integrated parts of our society, and has been historically, even back in the day and everything like that. But as well, a student of military history, would you agree with me on that? I know we've had some wars that have been biased, whether like the Civil War and some other ones, but definitely particularly in modern day times, it's hard to be.
100%. I think the thing that did more to move this country ahead in that connection was when Truman decided we were going to have blacks and whites and browns all together in the military. You're absolutely right. When you're fighting off an enemy in the foxhole, you ain't got time to worry about what color your friend is, is what he's going to do with his M1, you know?
Yeah, you probably don't even have time to worry about what his orientation is, or now there are more women in the military and everything like that. So you probably don't even have time to worry about their gender and everything like that. But I was just wondering, what is your thoughts around that, Jack? Because I'm seeing that the more women are going into the military. I know one of my good friends that I worked with, and she passed some years ago and everything. Her daughter went into the Navy and everything like that. I think she might be retired from the Navy now. I don't know if she's still in, but I do know that Justice went into the Navy and seemed like she had a good career in the Navy. But I just wanted.
Well, yeah, the Navy is so much different than when I was there. We went out on this VIP tour that when I got to tour on the West Coast, we toured the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln.
Mhm.
I was on a destroyer where the top ranking officer was a commander. They had four captains on that ship. That's like a colonel. And it showed their organization chart out front, all these people with all the brass. Guess who the commanding officer of that carrier was? It was a woman. And I turned to my friend who was in the Navy with me. I said, "Man, the Navy's changed since we were here." But that, I don't know what's happened to that woman. I should have kept up with it because they don't put you in command of one of those aircraft carriers unless you're slated to be an admiral. And I'd be willing to bet she's an admiral by now. So, yeah, it's changed. It's changed for the better. I will say, I think it's a real challenge in the Navy, maybe more so than the Army, because when you put, particularly on a small ship like a destroyer, when you put men and women together like that, things are going to happen, and it's just almost impossible to prevent it. There's a documentary out called Carrier, which is really good. I think it's PBS, and it goes into some detail about that and about how strict they are about that kind of fraternization. But you know, we're human beings, and these are young people. They're vital people. They've got all their juices flowing, and so I think it's a real problem on shipboard. But I'm glad that women are getting their shot.
Yeah, they're definitely getting their shot, and yeah, it definitely has become a problem because there have been cases of definitely abuse in that situation, and we definitely have heard some of that in the news reports and all along those lines, where, like you said, the juices are flowing, and sometimes people are being not respectful of the boundaries and everything along those lines. So there have definitely been reports about that and everything like that. Just really quickly, and this is for both of you and everything. How important has that work-life balance been in your life? I know, I'll start with you, Jack, because I know that you are married and been married for a number of years and everything like that. And it's something I talk about regularly on this online dinner party that I bring different people on and we learn from each other. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. But how important has that work-life balance been to you in terms of like dealing with your wife and just that whole work-life balance in general?
Yeah, yeah. It took me a while to figure that one out. I've been married 65 years, and the first 63 are the hardest. It gets easier after that. But I've had a wonderful luck, and I found a wonderful woman. Yeah, the work-life balance, I didn't get right at first. I was obsessed with trying to be successful. I was practicing law. Hindsight tells me that I was kind of running scared. I had a I had a very good career. I was really successful in the courtroom, but it was because I was up at 2 in the morning when my opponent was sleeping. And my kids paid the price for that. My first two kids got shortchanged, no doubt about it. My third one was somewhat younger, and I'd figured out by that time, instead of working at the office, I'd go home early and throw the football to him. So the first two, we've had our little frictions over time, not big, but we've had some. The third one, not ever. But I think it's really because those first two kind of resent the fact that, in fact, I'll just tell you one quick thing. When I got into a trial, I was so preoccupied that my two sons were at the breakfast table, and one of them spit a bunch of Cheerios onto the face of the other one. They were messing around. And he said, "Here comes Dad, you're really in trouble." And I came by, and he said, "No, I'm not. He's in trial." And so, sure enough, I never even saw it. I just kept walking. Well, that's a sad commentary on parenting. I'll tell you for sure. And if I had anything to do over again, I would have changed that mix because I now know I didn't have to be quite so obsessed in order to succeed. But I didn't know then. It was my first time trying to do that.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, makes sense. What about you, Faith? How have you dealt with that work-life balance? And you mentioned having kids. I don't know if you have a significant
Mhm.
other as well, but how have you dealt with that
No.
work-life balance?
So work-life balance, trial and error for sure. My niece, she's also a speech pathologist, and so I was able to use my life experience of, I used to work 16-hour days. Because there's a shortage in the field, I was able to work it like in the school system, for 8 hours, and then go and do home health for 2 hours, and then do private practice for another two. So I worked long days, and so my kids, as Mr. Ratliff said, my kids, they got the short end of the stick a lot of the time. So I told my niece, I said, learn from me, learn from my mistakes, and have balances. So she has a 1 year old, not one, she has one child, Sweet Arenze, and he's, oh my gosh. I tell her, I said, make sure you go home to him, play with him, take him to the park, do everything, work, those notes, they'll be there. So, but definitely take care of, home. So I think definitely putting that mask on yourself is important, first, instead of always taking care of others. So just make sure you take care of self,
Yeah.
because you'll get burned out quickly. I know I did. I got burnt out really, really quickly. So
And I kind of alluded to it earlier and everything like that, but I am a big fan of keeping play even as we get older, whether you're in the 60s or even in the 90s. And even my dad is he'll turn 85 in um, June, and his lady friend, who I think is in her early 80s and everything like that, she still is an avid dancer and everything like that. So I just wondered, how important do you think it is to keep that notion of play into your lives, and how do you maintain that sense of play? Because I do sometimes think that when we get into the work world, that rat races, they like to call it, and everything, that we forget that element of play even in our own lives and everything. And I even like to, as I mentioned, I was outside early on the steps listening to some of the birds around me and watching some of the butterflies and other things that might have been around as well. But how important do you think it is to have that sense of play, and what do you do to maintain that sense of play? So I'll start with you, Faith, but I want to hear from Jack as well.
I love to travel. I have a travel bug, and I'm always trying to find a way to either buy a ticket or use my passport. So just exploring, as you mentioned, you love going outside and looking at the butterflies. Send me to another country so I can look at their insects and how they do it. So definitely staying curious. I think that's really important, and staying playful, because if you walk around thinking you knowing everything, then it's like, where's the sense of adventure or fun? So I think staying curious.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Jack? How do you maintain that sense of play even with your wife and just life in general, and even with your grandkids?
Well, it's not easy at times, but it's a lot easier since I'm retired. I'm really lucky. I still play tennis 4 or 5 times a week. And I really believe, and I love it because I'm not very good at, I think exercise is really important, but I get bored in the gym and I get bored on the treadmill. But if I had advice for a young person, I'd say figure out something you can do that's fun. And then when you get through doing it, you find you tricked yourself into getting some exercise. And that's what I do with tennis. And I feel like I feel so much better when I'm able to. My partner's sick today, so I'm not going to get to play today, but so I'll be grumpy tomorrow. But yeah, I agree with Faith. I think that you've got to not only have a sense of play, but find a way for that outlet. For me, it's tennis.
Now, tennis is a wonderful outlet. My dad played tennis. He actually played against Arthur Ashe, and I know that he showed us a clip of him playing because they were both youngsters at the time. And there's a picture at the cultural center that I work at where Arthur is in that picture. And I think he might have been 6 or 7 at the time. And they played, and Dad showed me a copy of the article, because I think they were both in their preteen years. So they were both probably like 8 or 9. And one of the things that I can say that you will enjoy as a tennis player, Jack, is that when he showed it, me and my brother, and I think my 2 nephews, that same article and everything, Dad didn't get killed. He actually managed to compete with Arthur Ashe, even though this was a young Arthur Ashe. I think the score was like 6-3, 6-4, 6-4, or something like that. So he was actually competitive in the game. And unfortunately, he had some back injuries and everything else, but he's an avid swimmer. So he does not do tennis at his age now, but he does still stay engaged actively in terms of swimming and doing some other stuff, even though he recently had some heart issues and everything like that. But he's still very much involved in PT, physical therapy, as well as still doing some swimming as well. So I do agree that keeping that self active is very important. And I think sometimes we don't do enough of that and getting out, and even a good walk can be good. And sometimes we get too comfortable in terms of our lives and being sedentary and everything like that. 'Cause I know I could be guilty of that. So how did both of you avoid that, the sedentary aspect of life? Because I know sometimes we get too happy with DoorDash. I know I sometimes get too happy with DoorDash and some of the other things. So how do you maintain not being sedentary and motivate yourself?
I'll start. My kids will keep me on my toes between soccer practice, basketball, or cheer, and so keeping up with them keeps me from being sedentary. And then always traveling, singing, and performing. That's always I love to dance and move on stage, so I get a chance to do that as well.
That makes sense. And it sounds like you do it through tennis and Jack and everything like that.
Yeah, I do. But when I can't play tennis, I usually walk. I've got a hill outside my house, and it's kind of, it's not, I guess not recommended, but I've got earphones, and so I listen to tapes and get out and walk up and down that hill. But that's only when I can't play tennis.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was it like? Because I know that Faith is over there in California, and it sounds like you had an experience of working with something that California has been definitely dealing with a lot and everything like that. So, what was it like being involved in this whole fighting forest fires? You did yours in Yellowstone Park, and I can only imagine what that was like because that is a
Yeah.
big national park and everything like that. So, what was that experience like, and what are some of the lessons you learned from that experience?
Yeah, I don't know how much time you got. I'll try to make this brief, but that was a place where I almost, one of the things looking back at my life is how many times I should have been dead and I wasn't. And that's one of them. I was fighting as far as fire, and again, I didn't know what I was doing. They just put us on this line. We're digging trenches to keep the fire from coming crawling across the forest floor. And the fire was off in the distance. Then the wind changed and it started coming toward us, and we started walking away from it. Then we started running, and I was separated at that point from the rest of my crew. We got split up, and the fire was gaining on me, and I looked up, and the trees ahead of me were exploding in the path where I was running, and the fire was dropping down. So a wall of fire was chasing me, and a wall of fire was dropping down in front of me. I thought I was a goner, but I remembered something that fires don't move in a solid front usually. They move in little fingers wherever the gusts are. And I thought, okay. And I remembered from riptides. I'd been out to California, and I knew about riptides. You have to go laterally. You can't go against them or with them. So I decided, okay, this is a calculated risk, but I'm going to run at right angles and try to see if this is not one of those little fingers of fire. It turns out I was lucky, and it was. If it had been a solid wall coming toward me, I'd be gone. But I had to make a split second choice, and fortunately, I made the right one. I decided to run sideways and I got out of there. I was wearing steel toed boots, and I guarantee you, I set a record for the 100 yard dash in steel toed boots because I was moving out.
Yeah, steel toe boots are no joke because I do remember a long time ago working at a construction type job. I think I was helping move some plates or something like that, like maybe moving some pallets. That's the word I was looking for,
Yeah,
pallets. And I know that, and that might have been when I was doing something either for Bristol Myers or GlaxoSmithKline. It wasn't GlaxoSmithKline. It was probably either Bristol Myers or one of the other companies as a part time job. But I did have to get those steel-toed boots, and they're not the most comfortable boots in the world and everything like that. Because I remember that was one of the requirements was we had to buy those, and I just remember them not being overly comfortable and everything like that. So
and they're not very good for running either.
no, they're definitely not good for running there because I remember having to just walking them was hard enough. So I can only imagine what it would be like walking. Hey, Faith, you were there in California. Were you anywhere near any of those fire lines and everything like that? Because I
No,
know
no, I wasn't near.
well, that's good. 'Cause you would
Yeah.
got to avoid that because I do know that that was impacting a lot of folks in
Hmm.
California and everything like that. Just really quickly, and like I said, we'll wrap up in about 10 minutes and everything to answer your question earlier and everything like that. But just really quickly, Jack, what was it like dealing with this whole situation with the quick like shipboard commander? Because as I mentioned earlier, I can only imagine what it would be like dealing with a sniper fire from what you described as a deranged training instructor. So what was it like dealing with this whole notion of having to be in this shipboard commander? And I think you even described it as being right out of the Caine Mutiny.
Yeah. Well, it's a small ship. A destroyer is the smallest warship we have, And so you're right there on top of each other all the time. It's not quite like having an officer like that in the Army, because usually in the peacetime you get away from them some. On the shipboard, they're there and you're there 24 hours a day. So it's hard. And by that time, I understood I had to follow orders. But the, well, we involved ourselves in some petty rebellions. They're kind of childish, but you don't have any way to fight back. There's one particular officer that this bad exec kept picking on. I went after him all the time. The guy wasn't doing anything wrong, but the exec didn't just like him. So the exec's wife came in while we were in port in Long Beach, and she made a little coverlet for the top of the exec's metal chair with little balls, little velvet balls hanging down from it. She made a thing for his porthole with little velvet balls hanging down. And this guy that the exec was picking on had enough, so the exec would go up from the wardroom every night to check the night orders, and my friend Dick would sneak in there with a clipper and clip off one of those little velvet balls, and he just kept on night after night till and the exec was furious, and he knew somebody was doing it, but we weren't telling him. But I'm talking about how petty our rebellion was, because you can't stand up and tell them to go jump in the lake. My petty rebellion was I had a patch made for my foul weather jacket that I wore on the bridge in bad weather, and it was a circle, and it had an image of a Navy officer on it, superior officer with the braid. And it had one of those international slash, no go symbols through it. And the motto was illegitimi non carborundum, which is phony Latin for "don't let the bastards grind you down." So one day I was up on the bridge, and the print was pretty small, and the exec leaned over and read that, and he never said anything. He kind of glared at me. He didn't say anything. They never said anything to me about it. And maybe I thought later, well, maybe they thought I was talking about some other bastards, but I was talking about them. But that's an illustration. I'm not proud of that, but when you're in that situation and you're oppressed by somebody all the time, and you can't really tell them to butt out, you resort to some petty things like that, and it gave us a little satisfaction, a few laughs.
Yeah, we got those few laughs, everything like that. Hey, Faith, just really quick, as he was saying that, I was thinking about some of the times that I've been in heroin situations. Nothing major, but I do remember one time we had a tornado. I think I was staying, or a hurricane. I think I was staying with my mom at the time, probably while I was working as an adult, a younger adult, probably maybe late 20s, early 30s, everything like that. In Winston-Salem was when one of our, I think it was a hurricane, came through, and mom teases me even to this day because apparently the trees fell and I managed to sleep through that. So the tree fell right outside my door and everything like that. So even though if it had fallen a little bit further, I might have been like Jack, I might have been a goner and everything. But fortunately, it did fall and it didn't wake me up. So I was being a hard sleeper. I don't know that I'm as hard of a sleeper as I was during that time and everything. So I was wondering if there's any times that you've been in those harrowing circumstances that you were surprised that it didn't wake you up, or that was going on in that sense. Because like I said, this was probably 25 years ago, but it was one of our major hurricanes. Now that I think about it, it might have been Bertha, and I'm going like, oh yeah, because even now, mom's like, I don't know how you didn't wake up, because that tree was literally like maybe a half an inch from that door.
Wow. Well, the only thing I can think of, you talked about the tree. There was a tree. I guess my car was parked right, but it was like a row of trees, and this huge tree fell right on top of my truck, and I looked outside and I was like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't get to it. It looked like a little afro around the car. My car had an afro. That's what it looked like. And I was so thankful that I wasn't in the car when it happened. I was like, God, I thank you so much. Um, but yeah, and then when they removed the tree, it wasn't a scratch on the car.
Wow.
It was so crazy. But I had imagined when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that could have been me. So that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking about it when mom
Yeah.
mentioned that. Like I said, she still teases me about that to this day and everything like that. I don't know whether they tease me more about that or me having a drink, and you'll get a kick out of this, Jack, and everything, because you're talking about alcohol earlier. But we had stopped at some restaurant, and I think we got like some lemonade or some food and everything like that. And even to this day, my brother teases me because he's like, only you thought that that was good because everybody else was talking about how bad it was and everything like that. But I was just, but maybe I was too parched or whatever. But I was just enjoying it. They're going like that had to be one of the worst tasting drinks of all times. But you thought it was good and everything along those lines. So they still tease me about that because apparently my taste buds were dead that day and everything like that. So I don't know if y'all ever had a situation like that, but yeah, they still tease me about that mountain trip because they're like, yeah, that was some of the worst food and drinks. But yeah, you thought it was good. I don't know why you thought it was good, but you did, and everything like that. So this has been a fun conversation and everything like that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
definitely, as we get ready to wind down, there's something that I asked all my guests and everything like that. So definitely, I'll start with you, Jack, and end with you, Faith, and everything like that. But if you could tell folks how they can reach you and how they can get a copy of this book, I've kind of alluded to the title a couple of times and all along those lines. And if there's anything that you haven't got to that you'd like to get to, you can do that. And everybody on this show, call it my own personal ministry or whatever you want to call it, and everything. I love to have people give a message of positivity because Pod TV is a global network. So I figure the more positivity I can spread, the better the world will be in the time that I'm here and everything like that. So any positive messages you want to share with our global community?
My book, I've got a website, jackratliff.net. You can get it there. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Noble online and Book List online, or it's in almost all bookstores. Some of them may have to order it. But I think my observation is positive, though it's personal, and I hope I'm not out of line for saying this. But Faith, you got $1 million smile, man. I
Oh,
would
thank you,
love to
sir.
come hear you sing. I
Oh,
bet
I
you
would
you can
love, I love that.
you can light up a room. I can see that, man.
Oh,
So
thank
anyway,
you.
it's been a pleasure. I've watched you doing
Yeah,
this, and I can see a lot of
yeah.
personality there. I wish I could hear
Mhm.
you sing.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I would love to sing. Well, yeah, you can definitely, look for me on social media, at Faith Luster, the number one, and on Facebook it's just Faith Luster. And I do have music out. I have my first CD entitled Faith Luster. That's on all music platforms. And then my second CD that came out is called Elope, and that's out now. And so we do have music coming up, and we're going to record Accountability. So look out for that soon. But yeah, I've enjoyed this dinner party. Thank you so much for having me, and Mr. Ratliff. It was very nice. I used to go to high school in Houston, Texas. So every time you said
Yeah.
West Texas, I was like, yes, I know West Texas. So yeah, but yeah,
Know that
thank you
there.
so
You knew
much.
about it because in Houston you thought that's where all the yahoos were out there in West Texas.
That's
Yeah,
so
that's
funny.
definitely the case and
Yeah.
everything like that. Just really quickly, as we're like I said, wrapping up and everything like that. But what advice would you give to folks that? Because I just recently had it was part of a book that was published. It was a one of those number one bestsellers that my friend Brian Shulman put out, and I wrote a chapter about our non like our non-family family. So I think my chapter was called Soul Family or something like that. It was basically the people that are part of your family that aren't necessarily your blood family and everything like that. So I was just wondering, what advice would you give to folks that are thinking that they want to write a book? Because I've been involved in, I think, two books now. Because I also had a friend that actually translated one of these interviews when I interviewed Van Dorn Hennett, who is an artist, into a book. So he put our interview into a book form. And then, like I said, Brian had me write a chapter along with several other people as well. So, advice would you give to folks that are thinking that they want to be an author?
You know, a lot of people have a barrier because of in school you had to write themes, you had to write essays, and it's a block when they start to put pen to paper. And most people have that problem, but almost everybody has an interesting story to tell if you just get into detail. And my suggestion would be, don't if you're blocked that way, don't try to write it down. Get a tape recorder and just talk to it, or get somebody to interview you. I came out with a book before this one just for my family, and it's interviews with my father that my son and I did. He wouldn't have written it down, that's also something you can do other than yourself. Go to your grandpa and interview him because he's going to be gone, and there's going to be some questions you have, and you won't be able to answer them anymore. So my thought is, great, write down your life experience because if you get enough detail and enough incidents, almost everybody's life is a novel. So, but you
Mm.
got to start somewhere, and if you sit down to write, sometimes that stops it off. Just get a tape recorder. there's also some apps that you can get that actually ask you the questions, and then you dictate the answers, and then they take AI and put that into a book.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, I would sure encourage that.
Sounds
Mhm.
good. What about you, Faith? What would you tell folks that think that they want to be a singer, whether it's as a youngster or whether it's later in life? Because I've actually got a friend of mine that's a funk musician. He's a little bit older than I am. I think he's 66 or 67, and he's still doing his funk music and everything like that. So, what advice would you give to folks that are interested in getting involved in this whole entertainment music game?
I would definitely encourage them to um, not focus on the fame, but focus on your mission or your ministry, and let that be your driving force. Because if you go in it for the fame or the money, you'll be disappointed. You'll be disappointed. So definitely find your why, and why you're performing, why you're singing. I know for me, my why is I want to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ in a jazzy way, in a non-conventional way, singing at non-conventional places, and talking about who Jesus is. And so that's my why. So if I make a couple of dollars doing it, great. If not, still great. So that would be my advice, just to focus on your why, and hopefully it won't be about fame or money.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. I'll put you on the spot and everything like that. And I could put both of you on the spot, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put you on the spot, Faith. But if you want to give, since Jack mentioned it, just a little brief note of a song or an a
Okay.
cappella version, then we would love to hear your voice if you got the
Oh yeah, I
ability.
would love to. Yeah, I would love to. So one of the songs I try to open up all of my shows with, like a devotional or a worship song. And so one of the songs that I sing is the doxology. So are you familiar with the doxology?
Mhm.
So it goes, praise God from whom all blessings flow. Oh, 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 oh. Praise him, all creatures here below. Oh, oh. Praise him above ye heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Oh, oh, oh. Yay.
I've heard the doxology a lot, but I never heard it like that. Man, you made it sing.
Yay. Thank
Definitely,
you. Thank you
definitely
so
made it
much.
sing and everything like that. So as I'm
Yeah.
going to go out with this advertisement that I oftentimes play as I end this show, but it's the last question I'm going to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Faith. But this commercial comes from Oklahoma. Speaking of places that are west of me and everything like that, but it's a gentleman that honors not just the teachers of the world, but the people that are supportive of the teachers, whether that's the guidance counselor, the cafeteria worker, or the number of other folks, even the janitors, and all along those lines. So those are my grandmother, not the one that was a librarian, but the other one on mom's side was a cafeteria worker. And I've definitely had family members that have been teachers and everything like that. So I'll start with you, Faith. But how important has education and teachers been to you, or even those support staff? Maybe there was like a coach or a person that was in your life that you were supporting, because that's what this gentleman was doing out of Oklahoma. So what is
Yeah.
uh, how important has the teachers and their support been to you?
Oh, the teachers that I've been in contact with, especially high school for me. And I've been out of high school for 33 years now. And all of my teachers, we still, communicate either on Facebook or live, and they're so supportive of me singing. I went to the Performing Arts High School in Houston, Texas, and so those teachers, they still root for me, and just so supportive. And one of my Spanish teachers in high school, she helped me get my prom dress. So just outside of school, and within school, it's been the best experience working with educators. Yeah.
What about you, Jack? How important of teachers or even those support staff, whether it was a guidance counselor, because my mother was a guidance counselor before getting involved in philanthropy work, because she actually was the first president of the Golden Leaf Foundation and done a lot of other things, just like Dad was involved in civil rights. But her first job that I recall her having when I was a youngster, baby, probably even a baby and everything like that, was as a guidance counselor and everything like that. So how important have those people been in your life?
Oh yeah, several of them, but the main one, I guess, was my English teacher in high school. She was a small woman, but she was strong. She demanded excellence. And if you don't come up with it, you heard from her. And at the time, I thought she was a little overbearing, but she did more for me than anybody else in high school. And it's funny because she was not a big person, but we had in my West Texas high school, we had big old galoots, cowboys, football players, big old burly guys. Man, she could reduce them to jelly. She'd squint her eyes and say, Leroy, you better shape up or you're out here. So yeah, I owe a lot to that, but I've had other good mentors and I've had some great teachers in college, but I believe that her influence was the greatest on me, and she's been an inspiration to me. And the problem is they don't get any credit at the time. And one of the greatest rewards I had from teaching in law school is that 30 years after, I'll have somebody come to me and say, well, I had you for such and such a course, and I remember this thing you said. That's about all the reward you get, because it's not financial, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that. One of my good friends, and actually he used to do this show, The Legal Eagle, right after or right before my Blue show that I used to do on WNCU, which is at North Carolina Central University and everything like that, was Irv Joyner. And he is a well-known civil rights attorney and is still a lawyer and a law professor. So I'm going to have to put you in touch with Irv, because y'all will probably have all kinds of things that y'all can share and everything along those lines. I think Irv is probably a little bit younger than you, but not much younger. I think he might be pushing near like my dad's age, so like early 80s or something along those lines. He might be in the 70s, but he's definitely.
I'm always glad to talk to a young man like that.
Cool. I'll definitely have to put him in touch with you and everything like that. And on that note, I'm going to get us out of here with that commercial that I promised everybody and all along those lines. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully I can get y'all on some future shows as well. So I hope that y'all enjoyed it as much as I did, because I always enjoy bringing 2, sometimes 4 or 5 people on, and that's just sharing as we were doing today and learning from each other, because that's what I think of the dinner party being, is us gathering and learning from each other, which is what I feel we did again on this episode. So hope y'all had a good time, and I hope that I get the chance to see y'all in the not too distant future as well. But we're going to go out with this commercial from these people from Oklahoma and their award for both the teachers and their support staff.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
No problem.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we